All right, today we are forging our way deep into the heart of mythology to try and crack a kind of ancient code, one that's hidden inside the legendary weapons of the gods. Have you ever noticed that? How these epic stories seem to rhyme across completely different cultures? Why a divine weapon in one myth feels like a distant echo of another one from halfway across the world? Well, that's the big mystery we're going to get into today. And it all comes down to this one core idea. These stories, they aren't just one-off tales. They're all connected. They're part of this huge, shared human pattern of trying to make sense of the world, of power, and of chaos itself. So, where do we start? Well, our first echo is probably the loudest one out there. We're talking about the ultimate symbol of power, the thunderbolt. It's kind of like the signature weapon for any self-respecting skyfather, the god who's in charge of the storm. And of course, the prime example has to be Mjolnir, right? Thor's hammer. But see, it's so much more than just a weapon. It's the ultimate tool for pushing back against chaos. It's totally indestructible, it always comes back to his hand, and it's basically the physical form of order beating back the darkness. Now, this is where the pattern just snaps into focus. I mean, look at this. In Hindu myth, you've got the sky father, Indra, and he wields the Vajra, a divine thunderbolt. Then you jump over to Greek lore, and Zeus has his master bolt, which was forged for him by the Cyclopus. We're talking three different pantheons, but one single powerful idea. The storm god's authority gets real through an indestructible weapon. It really suggests this shared, ancient idea, maybe from a common Indo-European root, that the big guy in the sky needs a special tool to keep chaos in check. Okay, let's keep going and see how this pattern builds out. Next up, we're looking at the spear. But again, this isn't just any old spear. This is the weapon that represents absolute authority, divine will made sharp and pointy. In the Norse world, this is Gungnir, Odin's famous spear. Its name actually means the shaker, and its most important feature is that it's infallible. It never ever misses its target. And this wasn't just for fighting. Throwing Gungnir over an enemy army was basically a ritual. It was Odin's way of saying, "You belong to me now." An act of divine claim. And boom, there's the echo again. Hop over to Irish mythology, and you find the spear of Lugh. This thing is so lethal, so bloodthirsty, that it has to be kept in water just to keep it from going wild. And here's the shared theme that really ties it all together. Both Gungnir and Lugh's spear were gifts. They were made by supernatural artisans. So the message these myths are sending is pretty clear. Real power, the kind that can actually shape destiny, it doesn't just come from anywhere. It's a gift from another realm. But, not all divine gifts are exactly blessings. Our next archetype takes a much darker turn. We're going to explore these incredibly powerful blades that come with a terrible cost. We're talking about swords that almost seem to be alive with a will of their very own. The Norse sagas are just filled with stories like this. Take the swords Dainsleif and Tyrfing. They were forged by dwarves, but out of spite, and they carry this nasty curse. Once you pull them from their scabbard, they can't be put back until they've taken a life. Yeah, they guarantee you'll win, but they demand payment in blood. Every single time. And this theme, this idea of power at a price, it's everywhere. Dainsleif's curse echoes in Japan's story of the blood-drinking sword Kusanagi. Or think about the Irish hero Cuchulainn and his spear, the Gabbalg, a weapon that causes wounds no one can possibly recover from. What this all points to is this really profound warning that's baked into our myths. Immense power is almost always a double-edged sword, and it can be just as dangerous to the person holding it as it is to their enemy. So we've seen these incredible artifacts, right? Things that can literally decide the fate of gods and mortals. But that brings up a really interesting question. Who are the master crafters working behind the scenes? Who is it that's actually forging destiny? So let's pull back the curtain for a second and look at the real power behind the throne. These are the divine smiths, the artisans who are often overlooked, but who are, in so many ways, the god's own secret weapon. So the divine smith is this figure that just keeps showing up in world mythology. They're usually shown living underground or totally separate from the main gods. They are masters of fire and metal, and even though they're often on the margins of society, their skill is absolutely crucial for the gods to hold on to their power. In Norse stories, it's the dwarves and the so-called black elves. In Greek myth, it's the lame god Hephaestus and the powerful Cyclopes. And the pattern here is just striking. It doesn't matter if it's the dwarves or Hephaestus, these master crafters are always working deep inside the earth, holding on to these secrets of transformation that the glorious sky gods are completely and totally dependent on. They're the ones who actually turn a hunk of metal into an instrument of cosmic law. Now, all of this brings us to an even deeper level of what's going on here. Because these artifacts, they weren't just for, hitting things. They were incredibly complex symbols that helped define the very structure of the cosmos. Let's circle back to Mjolnir for a second. Yeah, absolutely, it was a weapon used for smashing the skulls of giants, but it was also used in sacred ceremonies to bless a marriage. It was about connecting Thor's protective power to fertility, to the health and safety of the entire community. A tool of pure destruction was also a tool of creation. And this idea isn't just about weapons either. The dwarves also made Gleipnir. It was this magical ribbon used to bind the monster wolf Fenrir. And it looked like it was made of silk, but it was stronger than any iron chain. It wasn't a weapon, it was a tool of order, a spiritual restraint designed literally to hold off the end of the world. Really, what it comes down to is that these objects acted as a kind of bridge. They were the link between the physical world of iron and gold and the metaphysical world of ideas like law and intent and destiny. They were the things that made divine power tangible, something you could actually see and feel. So, in the end, when we trace all these echoes, from Mjolnir to the Vajra, from Gungnir to the Spear of Lu, we're really doing more than just comparing some old stories. We're looking at what the source material beautifully calls a living map of the ancient soul's struggle for order. These myths, they show us this universal human need to forge some kind of meaning out of chaos, to give a physical form to power, and to believe that somewhere out there, in the hands of a god, there's a tool that can make things right.